Hello and welcome to my very late, very overdue, I deeply apologize for that, Patreon Q&A where I answer my patrons' questions in this Q&A. And if you want to ask a question, you can ask a question in the comments of this video, or you can subscribe to my Patreon for $1 and ask a question there when I put out a post asking for questions for the next Q&A, which I did ages ago and should have done this video ages ago. And yeah, can you tell I've drank a lot of coffee today? First question is from Siren Songs. I got a half-decent PC for the first time recently. I grew up a staunch Nintendo kid, so I have a ton of blind spots. Namely, I've never played a shooter all the way through. I don't even think I've gotten past the first level in one. What would be a good game to get me hooked on the genre? I reckon Wolfenstein 2014. I think it was called Wolfenstein The New Order, although that could be the sequel, is probably... this is a big call. I think it's probably the best single-player FPS in the last decade to have been released. It is a really, really effortlessly cool game that really makes you care about B.J. Blazkowicz in a way that I never expected to. It has a lot of soul, has a lot of heart, while still being a very B-movie style, bombastic FPS game that's really well designed. And I think like it balances a tonal tone. That's a good sentence. It balances a tone really, really well, where it never tips over into being sort of this fourth wall breaking wink at the camera. It always plays it straight, but everything you do in the game is quite ridiculous. Yet still it manages to sort of have this grounded story with realistic feeling characters. It's really just a great game. Feels great, plays great, great story. Thanks for asking. Deadly Premonition is a masterpiece, asks. Thoughts on Resi 4 Remake? I see a lot of people say it's not needed, but I'm interested to see if they can fix up some of the issues the original had. Not that it had many. And if I want to play the original, it's not like it's hard to find a platform with it available, lol. The only Resident Evil game I've finished is Resident Evil Gaiden, which I have a video on. So I can't really answer this question properly. I have played Resident Evil 4, and I think it's a fun and good game. And you know, Capcom have been hitting those Resident Evil remakes out of the park, so I guess it makes sense to make 4. But from what I've played of 4, I don't really think it needs a remake. I think you can get it on every platform, and it's still a really solid game from what I know. But yeah, I apologize for not being more knowledgeable on this topic. Shitpost Botmin. What aspect of making a video is most enjoyable for you? Interviewing, research, writing, editing. I love researching. I love the sort of... I love coming up with all the ideas. Before any pen's been put to paper, it's fun to just sort of live in that space where it's all ideas and picture how much I'm gonna love the final product. And then putting it together and realizing it takes a lot of work usually hits me. So yeah, researching I love. Writing, up and down. I find it can be hard to get into the zone for writing, but once I'm in the zone, I do enjoy it. Editing, I absolutely adore. I think once I'm at the editing stage, it's like every other piece of the puzzle, every hard thing is done, and now it's just time to put it all together, and it becomes this sort of zen-like process where I can just chip away at it and not hit any roadblocks in the same way that I do when writing. I do like interviewing a lot. I like clicking with people while talking to them, but it's a bit anxiety-inducing. Like every time I have to do an interview for the channel, I make sure I play like a whole bunch of tennis, or I go on a big run beforehand so that I get all of it out of my system, all of this like nervous energy, so I can do the interview. I'm only human. Sam Liss, have you played the newest Hitman trilogy? What do you think? I'm just getting through them now and I'm enjoying them. I really, really quite like them. I think they're really fantastic, actually. I bought 2 and 3 on release. I think that they're a bit hand-holdy in ways that Blood Money wasn't, and I think they're a bit tonally, how do you say it? They're too cheesy, I think. Like, I think Blood Money leaned into a certain level of edginess that I quite enjoyed. Not that it wasn't cheesy, but like, The new Hitman, like, it feels too much like it's turning to the camera and winking often, whereas Blood Money, you felt like, ooh, this game is like edgy, like 2006 emo edgy. And I think Blood Money had some better mechanics. Like, I love that you could shoot open doors. Um, and some I liked how many levels were in Blood Money compared to the new trilogy. But the new trilogy is really fantastic. They're like solid 8 out of 9, or sorry, 8 or 9 out of 10 type of games. And the atmosphere in them is just unreal. Like, some of those levels um, are just amazing. I think there was one set in a Chinese city in Hitman 3, and it was just, I don't know, it was just unbelievable. It's fun to just walk around in those games, and that's a real testament to the atmosphere in them. Jam asks, or JAM, if you had to release your own classic/mini console in the style of the PS1 and SNES ones with 10 games, what console would it be, and what would the games be? You can pick one that already exists, assuming you choose different games. My favorite console is the PS2. So I picked the PS2. I wrote notes for this question. I picked the PS2 and I wrote out like the 10 games that I think should be on a PS2 classic. So it was like San Andreas and Metal Gear Solid and Gran Turismo. And then I thought, that's boring. I don't like that. So I deleted all those things. I wrote it down, and then I wrote down options that I think are just really fascinating, interesting games that I think everyone should try. Because they're cool. They're not necessarily super popular, but I just think they're really interesting games. So this is more of a classic console in the mini-me style. So my first choice on the PS2 would be 007 Everything or Nothing. I think it's one of the best third-person shooters of its era. It's got a lot of set pieces. It controls really nicely. It's got all the Bondian aesthetics that you'd want. And yeah, it's just a very, very solid action adventure game with driving missions and just it's just a good time from start to finish. You're a very well constructed game. The next one I've entered is a game called Steambot Chronicles, which I've heard described as a meeting between Final Fantasy and Grand Theft Auto. It sort of sells itself as a more open-ended JRPG, a JRPG that's been heavily influenced by Western RPGs. And what it is it's crazy. It's really hard to describe. It's a very vast in scope RPG that's all about upgrading your mech suit, kind of. But you can go in and just play piano in a bar and level that up for ages, and you can walk around town and make friends with people, and it's a very, very charming, very, very janky. But the ambition, what it tries to be, is so incredibly vast in scope that it's impressive that a reasonably enjoyable game came out of that. The next one I've entered is Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. A video I made on this game earlier this year happened. And that's just a really, really fantastic third-person shooter with great music, great vibes, great verticality. There's a lot of verticality in this game. There's a lot of jumping up and down the sides of buildings, and the guns just sound like cannons, and it feels like an episode of the show, and it's really, really stylish in a way that is very charming. Next one, Jet Li's Rise to Honor, another one I've done a video on. Yeah, basically just feels like a Hong Kong action movie in the best way possible. It's an absolutely lovely game. It's one of my favorite PS2 games. And it's cool that I discovered that game for this channel, like it's a game that I just came across and played and absolutely fell in love with. I've played through it twice now, and yeah, good game. Next one, Downhill Domination, is just a really, really fun, really snappy controlling, fast-paced downhill mountain biking game where you really feel like as you're racing down these levels, you are falling about 70% of the time, and you need to like land perfectly and go off another jump, and then you're falling for ages, and it's just a racing game down a huge hill, and sort of this sense of vertigo where you're always looking down. It has a great feel. Mercenaries is my next one, which I'd like to do a video on as well. It's a fantastic example of sort of open world game design, where the open world actually really, really complements the game design. You know, it's not like the Rockstar style of just choose the mission and do the mission and end it. It's more like the Far Cry style of like, here's what you have to do and do it however you like. And it handles it really, really well, and it has a really, really good progression system. It's really satisfying. The game gets better as you go along. The next entry may be a more popular game, but is Midnight Club 2. And not Midnight Club 3, which is considered like the best in the series. I think Midnight Club 2 really, it doesn't really have like upgrade systems to your car. It doesn't have licensed cars at all. They're all fictional cars. And I think what's really, really interesting about Midnight Club 2 is how focused it is. It's just this sort of very, very pure racing game where the only thing that matters is the racing in the racing game. And it's handled in such a engaging, fun way. Like the controls are really, really snappy, and the vibe is great, you know, with the nighttime setting and the electronic music, and it's almost as pure as an open world racing game can be in the best way possible. Up next, Shadow of Memories. Done a video on this one too. I just think it's a really, really fascinating story-driven Japanese game. You all know my opinion on that one. It's cool. The next one sold millions of copies. It's not really a hidden gem, but it's The Getaway. And I don't even think The Getaway is that good, but I think The Getaway is really, really, really interesting in that it tried to be the best game ever, right? Like the way they modeled out London in that game is unreal. The way it has licensed cars in an open world GTA style game is still really, really unique. And the way the sort of combat works and the story was told is all very, I guess, unique is the best word for it. It all tried to be very cinematic, and it didn't really pull it off, but I think it's so fascinating because of what it tried that I wanted to put it in this collection. And finally, War of the Monsters is just a wonderful monster fighting game. I think it's Rampage in 3D in the best way possible. It was amazing playing that one as a kid, and sort of seeing how you stepped on pedestrians and they became little blood splats and you could knock down every single building, and combat felt really great, and the split screen would merge into a single screen when you approached your opponent, and had all these cool sort of things that I hadn't seen before. Not to say it was the first to do all of those things, but it executed all of them really, really well. So yeah, thank you for the question. That was a fun little exercise for me. Nicholas Wilson says, what haven't you reviewed that you would really like to? The Longest Journey. There's a game from 1999 called The Longest Journey, which was a point-and-click adventure game, and I'm not really a person that adores point-and-click adventure games, but I absolutely adore The Longest Journey. I think the protagonist and the voice actress who voices her are really, really fantastic and keep the game grounded in a way that is really absorbing. Like, yeah, just playing that game, I just feel really like sucked into this whole world and just taken away and swept away by it all. And yeah, I think it's quite a magical game. Alejandro Castillo, have you played the RPG versions of id Software classics, Wolfenstein RPG and Doom 1 and 2 RPG? If so, what is your opinion on it? Have you ever thought about making a video about them? I think that would be amazing. I love to play those games. I love to play those on my old Java phone. Yeah, I've tried them. I think they're really, really great. I think they're fascinating and surprisingly well executed. And I think they went long forgotten for a while in the internet space. But Stop Skeletons from Fighting just made a really good video about them. So if you haven't seen that, you should go check that out. I have considered making a video on them, but I'm not really much of like a Doom head. You know how some dudes on the internet just absolutely adore Doom and sort of know the game inside out? I didn't grow up with Doom really. Like I kind of did. I played it as a kid, but I didn't appreciate it like everyone seems to. So it never felt right doing Doom videos. So I think that's why I kind of just put off doing Doom 1 and 2 RPG and Wolfenstein RPG. But I haven't like taken the idea off the table. Like I might still do it sometime, but yeah, no, they're cool games. They're impressive. Cannondorf, hey Peter, did Wicked Witch ever update AFL Evolution 2 to let you make clearance kicks pathetic? I've seen that AFL video so many times, I need answers. Yeah, they actually did. They let you slide down the distance that clearance kicks would go. The problem is, so you can only do that in single player, I think. Oh no, you can do it on couch multiplayer, but the problem is the AI do clearance kicks all the time. So what happens is, if you can't just nerf clearance kicks for you, you have to nerf clearance kicks for both teams. So they'll start doing clearance kicks all the time that go nowhere if you make clearance kicks pathetic. And then that makes the game really, really easy because they'll just keep like narfing these kicks and you'll just pick up the ball and run with it. So yes, they did, but it didn't really fix much. It just kind of created a new problem. Ducking Heights, hey Mini-Me, aka Funny Thumbnail Face Guy, considering you are the Driver 3 enthusiast like yourself, and you adore the cinematography presented in Driver 3's cutscenes, what are your thoughts in the cinematography presented in a Yakuza game? Say for example, Yakuza 0. With Yakuza 0, I adore how Yakuza 0 effectively and easily creates tension between a cast of characters, with it immediately bringing in a sense of unrest and hidden conflict in cutscenes. Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, I have played the Yakuza games, and I think the way those cutscenes are directed is amazing, and in an incredible, corny, but like reveling in its corniness. They sort of capture a certain level of old cinema camp that I absolutely adore. Like a bit like old Hong Kong action movies, maybe. I'm sure there's probably a closer comparison to Japanese cinema considering what they are. But yeah, I think the voice acting in those games is wonderful, at least for the later ones. Cinematography. Yeah, I guess it's really fun cinematography, you know? It's like the camera's flying around and zooming in and zooming out, and I adore that level of cheesiness in a game like that. And the cutscenes are really effective. I'm not saying they're bad at all. I'm actually saying they're really good. Yeah, I haven't thought a lot about this, but it's a good question. Another question: what are your thoughts on the Medal of Honor trilogy on PS2, GameCube, Xbox, i.e. Medal of Honor Frontline to European Assault? I had those games when I was growing up, and I loved them, especially Rising Sun with its unique co-op campaign, and European Assault for the tactical, like first-person shooter it is sorta, plus the difficulty too. Yeah, it's funny to remember that era because the Medal of Honor games back then were big, right? Like it was the big World War II franchise. I didn't feel like Call of Duty was the big World War II franchise until the mid-2000s. So for a while there, Medal of Honor was it. Like Medal of Honor was the big FPS premiere cinematic Steven Spielberg franchise. And I had Medal of Honor Frontline, and I remember thinking that that D-Day mission was absolutely incredible. But then I learned that D-Day mission was kind of just the one from Allied Assault, which came out earlier. But they felt good to play at the time. I don't think they've aged very well, but they felt really good to play at the time. And they were always very impressive production value-wise. And the soundtrack was really good too. I think it was by a guy named Michael Giacchino. I could be wrong. But yeah, it felt like Saving Private Ryan, the game, which was always fun. I remember thinking Frontline dropped off a lot after that mission, though. That kind of just became a bit simplistic. But I really liked Allied Assault. I played that later and enjoyed that. I haven't played a lot of Rising Sun or European Assault. I remember European Assault being a late release. So it sort of felt like a PS3 game on the PS2, and I remember it being kind of laggy and a bit underbaked. Rising Sun, I remember feeling really janky as well, but again, I've only played those games briefly. So, yeah, maybe I should go back and do a video on them. They're cool. I like Medal of Honor, you know. Final question, but this time a joke question. Did you need to seek a psychiatrist after finishing Stuntman? I didn't, but the Scarab of Lost Souls film scenes were so hard to beat, I almost did. It's funny though, the Scarab of Lost Souls is actually quite a lot easier than the final movie in the game, the Bond movie. Yeah, the Bond movie was really, really really hard. Like it was real. I remember just when I was doing that review, I muted it. I put on a podcast. I basically tried to switch off my brain so I didn't get mad at it. And I just went for it until I finished the game. And I think I spent just as much time on that final movie in the game than I did with the rest of the game. But no, I didn't seek a psychiatrist. I did happen to see a psychologist again after beating that game. So maybe there's a connection there. But no, yeah, it's a difficult game. It's funny recommending that to people. Like, I've talked to people that played that game that absolutely hate it. And it's sort of funny talking to them as someone who adores it. It's same with the Driver franchise. Like, some people really hate those old Driver games, and understandably so. So it's funny sharing my love for them with them. But yeah, thank you for the questions, Ducking Heights, and thank you for the questions, everyone. And apologies again for this being so late. Okay, so I was editing this video and I realized I missed a couple of questions. So here we are on a laptop microphone answering the 2 questions I missed. Giant Purple Pen 15 asks, what are your thoughts on isometric RPGs? Do you have a favorite? And do you prefer turn-based or real-time with pause? I don't have a lot of experience with isometric RPGs. I've tried a bunch of them and I've failed to get into all of them, so I don't really have a favorite. As far as RPGs in general, I think if they're really, really long, I lean towards preferring just full-blown turn-based, because I can sort of switch my brain off and not pay that much attention and sort of make my way through the game, make it more of a relaxing experience. But if it's a shorter RPG, I prefer real-time or real-time with pause. But in the sphere of isometric RPGs, I need to play more of them, but thank you for the question. Robbie Grieg asks, hey Peter, just rewatched your Bloodstone review and thought of a question that intrigues me. As a 007 fan, what would you like to see in the new and upcoming IO Interactive game? Good question. I suppose, much like the original Game Boy's 007 game, I'd like it to do less with combat and more with everything else that is Bond. Like, I really liked how in that game, it was all about problem solving and sort of adventure game elements where you're talking to different people and using different items on things, and gambling. There was a lot of gambling in that game. I quite like the idea of Bond sitting down at a casino table with the villain. So I'd like to see some of that in the IO Interactive game. But I think I would still like it to lean into action sometimes. I think the Bond franchise from start to finish has always leaned into big action set pieces. So I'm not saying I want some like cerebral point and click adventure style 007 game. Just a 007 game with the I guess the variety that original Game Boy game had would be really interesting to me. Sort of a game that is all encompassing of so many different genres, right? Like 007's driving cars and he's shooting people and he's social stealth stuff, which IO Interactive is really good at, and he's solving problems MacGyver style. So if they can somehow merge all those mechanics together, I'd love to see that. It's I don't really know what to expect, but I know that the Hitman games feel enough like Bond games that this is exciting. But thank you for the question, Robbie. And this interlude over, so back to my original recording. Goodbye. I'll do another post on the Patreon asking for more questions for the next one, which I will do faster than this one. I meant to do them every 3 months, and I think it's been 4 or 5 months. So cool. Hope you've been well. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed this video. I am thinking about doing maybe like weekly rambly videos like this on the second channel, maybe trying to grow the second channel a bit just as a non-scripted outlet, like sort of like how my reliving videos used to be, just something where I can just talk about things. Like, a lot of people ask my opinions on like Mafia 2 and 3, and I don't really want to make a video on Mafia 2 or 3 because I don't like them that much, like a full video, but I could make a second channel video where I just ramble about them a bit. So ideas like that, maybe that's a fun idea. Let me know if you'd be into that. And take care of yourselves. Goodbye.